this one. In this video, I got a very simple question to ask you, and hopefully this will get the gears turning in figuring out, why some of these things that I will talk about in this video can be very crucial. Because if you do not give yourself time to think about these things well in advance before you show up to an interview or before you take that assessment, you may end up picking the wrong things or saying the wrong things. And we don't want that. We don't want you to say the wrong things. We want you to succeed. We want you to excel. We want you to achieve your dreams. Now, if you're new, before we go into it, please consider checking out the channel. If it's something that you believe will benefit you now or in the future, consider subscribing. Now, one of the first things that I want you to get going with is this, right? We have competencies that are required to do any job out there in any field. Whether you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, you want to be an engineer, you want to be whatever, a pharmacist, right? There's so many competencies that are often required in order for you to gain access or to be able to get employment or become employed in that field. And the aviation world isn't an exception. And in fact, the aviation world is somewhat a very delicate one, because you have to make sure that this person truly has the competency, because this is a career. It's not something you do, hopefully, it's not something you do for a short time. It's something you want to do for a very long time. And you want to make sure that the person you are hiring as an employer that has an aviation company, an airline, or whatever, you want to make sure that the person you're employing has this competency. And that is why this channel is here for you, because my goal is to be able to teach you some of the lessons that I've learned along the way as someone that is in the aviation industry and I've spent years and time training other people and also getting trained. Now, the first thing that I want you to take away is, what are the 9 or 8 competencies that there are? According to the International Air Transport Association, we have about 8 or 9 competencies, depending on where you look, all right? The first one is communication, second one is situational awareness, third one is problem solving and decision making. The fourth one is workload management, followed by leadership and teamwork. Next is application of knowledge and procedures. Then we have airplane flight path management, automation, and last but not least, airplane flight path management manual. Note that some airlines sometimes had 1 or 2 to this list, so make sure you do your research well. All these competencies, which I'll try to put up on the screen, do have what they call observable behaviors. There is a reason why they are called observable behaviors, because when you show up to an assessment or you show up to an interview, the person that is interviewing you, okay, the interviewer in this case, will need to check some things as they interview. So they will ask you some questions, a series of questions, or give you an assessment to take, and they are checking for these competencies along the way. Now, it will do you a lot of good if you get very familiar with these competencies well in advance, because that's not, hopefully, you're not showing up to an interview without having any knowledge of these competencies. And the question that I want to pose to you right now at this stage, assuming, you are thinking, and hopefully I'm getting the gears turning. All right. Remember, I said at the beginning of this video that I want to ask you a specific question. And the question is, which of these competencies that I've just mentioned do you believe is the most important competency to have as a pilot? Now, I wouldn't want to take too long, because I wish, this was kind of like a live, conversation where we can dialogue and share opinions. But I know that this can be very controversial, where a lot of people would have, I believe it's communication, or I believe it's situational awareness, or I believe it's leadership and teamwork or decision making. But guess what? Everything is important. So when it comes to that question, it was a trick question. The truth is, all those competencies I've just mentioned are very important, and none of them is more important than the other, because hey, you cannot operate without communicating. You cannot operate an airplane without being able to make decisions. You cannot operate an airplane without being able to maintain situational awareness, and the list go on, right? So the point here is, none of these competencies can exist without the other in the world of flying. And this is where you as a person need to think about, how are these competencies? How can you find ways to demonstrate these competencies when you go in for an interview or you go in for an assessment? All right. And how do you maintain Very important. How do you maintain this competency even when you start training? For those of you that are already training or working as a pilot, because one of the deadliest things that can happen in aviation is complacency, or just the fact that you do not go back to review some of these things. And we can talk about this aspect of complacency in another video, but let's stay on the topic of the pilot competencies. So understand that they are all important. Now, the next question is, how are you able to demonstrate these competencies when you go in for that interview? And I think this is the next hurdle that I believe a lot of people struggle with, whether this is through a cadet program, whether it's through just getting accepted into an ATO or an approved training organization or a flight school, or just getting a job as a pilot. This aspect can be a difficult one for a lot of people. And this is why I always recommend that before you go in for any interview, before you show up to any assessment, make sure that you know exactly how the assessment will be conducted. Because if it's going to be a competency-based interview, which most of these aviation organizations do use competency-based approach for their interviews, then that means that you have to be very familiar with the competencies, pilot competencies, and then be able to demonstrate them through those questions that they ask you. And this is where we can talk about things like STAR, all right, the STAR approach, okay, all right, or we can talk about things like TDODA and the other acronyms that exist. I've talked about LEAR in the past. I've talked about things like I'm safe that you can use in answering certain questions. But that is not the main purpose of this video. The main purpose of this video is that in thinking of these competencies, ask yourself, how can you use your experiences to demonstrate that you have and understand these competencies? And the last point in this video would be, how are you able to use your experiences in line with the pilot competencies in the world of aviation? Remember, when you go in for any opportunity out there, they're looking for transferable skills. And yes, you have the competency, but think about a competency as like the subject, okay? But what would make the difference is if your experiences can be tied to that subject of the competency, okay? And then you can relate it to aviation. And I wish I had some things to actually make this more, drawn out and visualized in a way, but I hope this all makes sense. If you have found value in this short video that I just decided to share with you, please don't forget to drop a like on it. Check out my next video. I'm sure you will benefit from it as well. See you there.